So today we're going to talk about adding polynomials. Before beginning today's notes, go ahead and set up your notes, polynomials, Unit 4B, Homework 2 with the appropriate date, and make sure the right-hand side of your paper is set up for any questions or comments that we'll have as we go along. So I'm going to use solar panels to help me explain the idea of adding polynomials. We can think of a square solar panel with x rows and x columns, and we can represent that by being an x squared algebra tile. Now, just a column of cells can be represented with the x algebra tile. And then, of course, one single cell of your solar panel will be represented by +1. Go ahead and take a moment. You don't have to copy the picture of the solar panel, but make sure you get these representations before continuing on. Suppose there were 3 square solar panels that each had x columns and x rows, 2 columns with x cells, and 3 single solar cells. What would that look like? Well, our 3 square solar panels with x columns and x rows would be represented by 3 x squared panels. And then our 2 columns with x cells would be represented by these 2 panels. And then finally, our 3 single solar cells would be represented by our 3 + 1 panels. Now, we can go ahead and take these and represent these as an equation. My 3x squareds would be represented by 3x squared. Then I'm going to add that with my 2x panels. And then finally, I'll add that with my 3 1s. So my equation would be 3x squared plus 2x plus 3. So I can represent it as an equation, or I can represent it with algebra tiles. So let's talk about how we can use algebra tiles to help us when we're adding polynomials. First, we have 2 different setup of polynomials. We want to be able to add them. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull them into 2 separate pieces so I can represent them with algebra tiles. So let's model what this would look like. So I have 3x squareds, I have 3 negative x's, and I have 5 negative 1s. On my next one, I have 2x squareds, I have 5 x's, and I have 3 + 1s. So the first step is identify and remove the 0 pairs. And by that is, all you're going to do is you're going to match up the ones that would cancel each other out. A negative x would cancel out a positive x. So what I did is I took my negative x's and positive x's and I paired them up. My negative ones with my positive ones, paired them up. And those are going to be the pieces that cancel. Once they cancel, I want to just focus on what's left. Before continuing on with our steps, go ahead and take a moment, pause, copy, and then we'll finish out the rest of the problem. So I'm left with 3 plus 2 x squareds for a total of 5x squareds. I notice I'm left with 2 single x tiles and 2 negative 1 tiles. So let's go ahead, and once I combine my tiles, I want to go ahead and write the polynomial that's being modeled by these. So I start with my 5x squared to model my x squareds. I have 2x to model my 2x's. And I have negative 2 as a constant to model my negative 2. So 5x squared plus 2x minus 2. Now we can also add horizontally. So this is another way to add where you don't have to use algebra tiles, which can be time consuming, but they give you a great visual. So my first step is I want to identify like terms. So I'm going to go ahead and take these pieces and I want to identify what my like terms are. So the first thing I notice is that I have 3x to the 3rd power. And I don't see anything else that has a 3rd power. So that's going to be kind of left off to itself. Now I do notice that I have 2 different x squared terms, and those are considered like terms. I have two different x terms that I'll be able to combine. And I have two constant terms that I'll be able to combine. So now I want to move everything where I'm grouping my like terms together. So I start with 3x3, nothing else goes with it. I'm going to be adding 2x squared plus 4x, and I got plus because my 4x was positive. Then I'm going to add my x terms. I have a negative 5x and a positive 2x. Once again, the sign in front of it, you want to take it with it. And then I have my constant terms, 7 subtract 3, positive 7, negative 3. Now that you've grouped your like terms, all you have to do is add the coefficients of the terms. So once again, I start with 3x to the third power. Now I want to add the coefficients of this, 2 plus 4. And that's going to give me a positive 6x squared, so plus 6x squared. Next, focus on negative 5 and 2. And that gives me a negative 3x, so minus 3x. And then 7 subtract 3 gives me 4. So based on this, I was able to, adding horizontally, simplify down to the correct equation. Take a moment, pause, copy before continuing on. Now a third way that we can add is we can add vertically. And that means that we're going to take our two polynomials and we're going to line them up one underneath. So vertically align our like terms. We'll start with our first term, our first polynomial. And then I'm going to take my second polynomial and I want to line it up underneath. Notice my squares line up, my x's line up, my constants line up. If you don't have a term, then leave it blank. Now we're set up to go ahead and start adding our coefficients. So we're going to start with our first term. And since there's nothing we're adding it to, it's just going to come straight down. And that'll give us 3x to the third. Now I move on to my x squareds, 2 plus 4. And that gives me a positive 6x squared. Now we do negative 5 plus 2, combine the two, and that gives me a negative 3x. And then finally, 7 subtract 3. And that gives me a plus 4. So from here, once again, we can use algebra tiles, we can add horizontally, or we can add vertically. So for our try it out, for the polynomials 1 through 3, I would like you to add them using the strategy of your choice. Once again, write your answers in standard form with the greatest degree going first, and it's in descending order. Take a moment, pause, work your try it out before continuing on for the answers. Now, as you check your answers, keep in mind if you didn't get something that you thought you should have gotten, make sure you put a star by it and ask questions when you come to class next. See you next class.